Okay, so today we're going to talk about migration, and I'm Nicholas.
I'm Elliot.
And I'm Layne.
So, what is migration? Migration is a seasonal long distance movement of animals from a region to another, and these animals can move from north to south or south to north. There's two times of the year when these animals migrate, and that's in fall and in spring. So a lot of animals have to make sure they store up plenty of energy before they make this journey because sometimes they can travel thousands of miles. The reason these animals migrate is for three main purposes: to get to warmer temperatures, to get to a better food supply, and to be able to raise their young in a place that is environmentally suiting.
Okay, so now you know why animals migrate. Let's talk about the different types of migration. So, first, there's obligate migration. This is where an animal has to move in order to survive. An example of this is the hummingbird. It has to move south during the winter, or it will be too cold for its food source, and then it will die. Facultative migration is where animals can choose to migrate if they want to. The Canadian geese is an example of this. Not all geese actually have to migrate. If they're already living in a warm environment, then they just stay where they are. Complete migration is where all animals in the population migrate. This is an example where salmon move upstream in the winter in order to have their young in a food-rich environment and a safe upbringing. Partial migration is where only some animals in the population migrate. A blue jay is an example of this. Blue jays only migrate if their area runs out of food source. So if they have plenty of food, they don't actually migrate anymore. So today we're going to tell you about some animals that migrate that you can see here in Tennessee, specifically in the wildlife observation area. First, we're going to be talking about monarch butterflies, then we'll talk about bufflehead ducks, and finally we'll end with songbirds. So monarch butterflies, they do obligate and complete migration. This means that they all have to migrate in order to survive, every single individual in the population. First, during the winter, the butterflies travel from Canada and the United States, where they normally live in the summer, and then they travel all the way to Mexico City, which can be up to 3,000 miles in just one direction. They make this trip over the Gulf of Mexico in order to get to Mexico, and then they huddle on fir trees to stay warm during the winter. In the spring, when temperatures rise, the butterflies migrate back to Canada and the United States. Now, their return trip is a little different because they stop several times along the way to eat their favorite food, the milkweed plant, and have offspring. Now, really interesting is that the butterflies actually have up to 5 generations on their way back home. This means that no single butterfly actually makes the entire round trip. They only make it down to Mexico, and then those butterflies die before they get back to the United States. Scientists are still trying to figure out just exactly how the offspring know where to go since they've never been there. And here you can see in the orange regions is where the butterflies stay during spring and summer. And then during the fall and winter, they move to Mexico City, and then they move back in the summer when temperatures rise.
So the bufflehead duck, it has obligate and complete migration, which once again means they all have to migrate in order to survive. So during the summer, these bufflehead ducks nest in Canada where it is slightly cooler than it would be in further south. And there's also lots of insects for them to eat while they're there. During the winter, they come down to the southern United States and stay from about November to April. These ducks in eastern Canada will migrate to the eastern United States, while there's also a population in western Canada that will go to the western United States. And while they're migrating, they can actually reach speeds of up to 48 miles per hour. So here on this chart, all the area in purple is where they will stay during the winter time where it's warmer. And then in the orange area is where they will nest and have their babies in the summertime. And then the yellow areas is where they pass through on their migration trip. So they migrate back north to this in the summer to raise their young because, like I said, there's lots of insects up there during that time of year. And also when they go back north, they will sometimes use the same nest as they had the previous year. And there are a couple populations or groups of bufflehead ducks out in the western United States that they're in pretty moderate temperatures, so they won't migrate at all.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about songbirds. So to keep in mind, these songbirds can be found, like we said earlier, at the wildlife observation area that's just right down the road here in Jefferson City. So songbirds have many different species. Over to the right here, we see an eastern bluebird, which is one example of a songbird. So some things to keep in mind is that they can be both insectivorous or omnivorous. Now, I know that right now, those are very big words that are hard to say, but I promise you, I'm going to try my best to explain those in these upcoming slides. So they'll migrate south in late August to mid-September, and then they'll migrate back up north when springtime rolls around and the temperatures start to rise back up here in the United States. So here we're talking about food as a driving force for their migration. So as I said earlier, there's a certain selection of these songbirds that are insectivorous. So what that means is these songbirds have adapted over time so that their diet consists of only insects. So what this means is that whenever it gets to that late August, mid-September time period, up here up north, those insects are going to start to die off, and so their food supply is going to be less abundant. So this is going to force them to have to migrate down south near the equator, where temperatures are going to be a little bit higher and energy is going to be more prevalent. There's going to be more food source for these songbirds. So this is that they have obligate migration, meaning that they have to migrate in order for them to survive these winter months because they need food. Next, we have the omnivorous songbirds. So what this means is, and you guys may have talked about this by now, but if you think of the word omnivore, meaning that they can eat insects, but they can also feed on fruits and seeds as well. So what this means for these songbirds is they're a little more flexible with their time frame that they have to migrate. So because they have more food options like fruits and seeds and things like that, they don't necessarily have to migrate on that specific time because they're not limited to food source. So this means that their migration is actually going to be a little bit safer than those other songbirds because they can choose more suitable times and nights to fly down south and get down there to where there's more food source. So what this means is that they have facultative migration, meaning that they can kind of choose when they want to fly down. They can be a little lenient with all that stuff. So right here we have a map. As you can see, during those summer times when it's hot and energy is more abundant up north, we see them then that late September, that August time period, those arrows come down south to where the equator is, where it's going to be more warmer during those winter months, and they can get a good food source for themselves. So in summary, what have we learned today? So we've learned that migration is driven by energy. So species need to migrate to find living conditions for an effective and efficient lifestyle. So whenever I think about animals migrating down south and they need to build up this energy to make that trip, I always think about whenever I'm taking a vacation with my parents or my family and we're going to the beach or something, and the first thing I'm doing before I hit the road is I'm going to stop by the gas station, pick up some gummy worms, pick up some chips, maybe a Mountain Dew, and I'm going to build that energy before I hit the road. So the same thing with these animals is they have to build energy before they make the long trip. Another thing, the main reason species migrate is to stay alive. So all three of the factors that we talked about, which was temperature, food, and breeding, determine why and where these species migrate to. They have to find suitable areas for them to make it through those winter months and continue staying alive. And finally, some species have to migrate for survival while others can choose when or if they want to migrate. It's that facultative migration that we talked about. Some species can choose whether or not they want to. Some species, they have to migrate in order for them to survive. This is our presentation. We thank you guys for listening so much. We would love to hear questions. I don't know how your teacher would want to go about doing that. Maybe she can answer them for us, but we appreciate you guys and hope that you enjoyed it.